Area. Right.
Può darsi a venire da me. Alors, comme c'est 31, une touche. Et puis, un bouton flash. Ah, ok. Parfois. Ah, c'est. Ah, ok. Okay, what do you think of it? I mean, you should see here at the very beginning, but then I think that I introduce this is yours, right? That's mine. Okay. Can I get it with you tomorrow? Yes. This is sweet. I leave my mobile. Thank you. Leave it here. Oh, wow. Yeah. Salut Samy, j'ai vu ton message vraiment en retard. Désolé. Ben, très rarement, ça va être une fois tous les. Shall we start? Dear Excellencies, dear guests, dear colleagues and dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. Today, 50 years ago, on March the 3rd, 1973, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, this convention with this lovely acronym of CITES, was signed in Washington. That's why we also call it the Washington Convention. And that's why also today there is a similar event across the ocean. And several of the people from Switzerland are there, and probably also vice versa. We are here to honor the 50th birthday of CITES and to celebrate World Wildlife Day. The 3rd of March was in fact chosen by the United Nations to be the World Wildlife Day. And this year's theme, Partnerships for Wildlife Conservation, is an opportunity to highlight the people and organizations who are making a difference, important partners to the CITES Convention, who are making significant contribution to sustainability, wildlife, and biodiversity conservation. I was saying earlier that for me, the CITES Convention is a daughter of another time. And when the people of the world were able to gather and sign a convention with very strong commitment and a convention that is very effective, actually. It's one of the few conventions that is able to enforce measures for nature conservation at borders and to regulate markets. And for me, it's always been a convention that I loved because of that, because it is efficient. We wouldn't probably have any elephants, rhinos left if there wasn't for CITES. CITES affords varying degrees of protection to almost 39,000 different species, 85% of them being plants. And this is interesting. I was speaking about rhinos and elephants, and I think in the general public, that's what CITES is identified with. Few know that 85% of all the CITES listed species are plants, actually. And this probably has to do with plant blindness on one side, this condition of society that is unaware of the plant diversity. And on the other side, I'm very happy that the organizers choose the botanical gardens of Geneva to hold their celebration. So it's also an opportunity for me to speak about plants. Ladies and gentlemen, let me therefore warmly welcome you here at the Geneva Botanical Garden and take this opportunity to thank the CITES Secretariat, Geneva Environment Network, for organizing the event. We are just the host, we are just the platform. And the Swiss Confederation for its support. Be welcome here anytime. Please contact us for interaction. We are a public space. We are a museum. You can contact us also for tailor-made guided tours or for a simple visit. The Conservatory and Botanical Garden of the City of Geneva, that's the official full name, is a 19th century style institution which has an encyclopedic approach to botanical science. In fact, it was founded in 1817 by Augustin Pyramus de Candolle, who was the first botanist in history to compile a catalogue with all known plant species at the time, basing upon a systematic evolutionary approach. The nature of the institute, as envisioned by its founder, has survived to the present day, and that's very interesting. Geneva, the city, has always financed this institution. We never had any fires, any floods, any wars. And that's why this place, actually, today, is one of the rare places in the world where the universe of botany is concentrated just a few steps away. We have one of the biggest and most well-organized herbaria in the world. We have a library with all botanic works ever published in the world just over here. We have amazing living plant collections. We also have seed vaults, molecular genetics, laboratories, and DNA collections. We are also registered as a scientific institution with CITES, which facilitates the exchange of specimens for research or conservation purposes. On a personal note, I am also very proud and happy to be able to host this event here at the Botanical Garden in Geneva, as I have the privilege to be a member of the Swiss CITES Scientific Authority, and as such, I regularly take part in conventions of the parties of CITES. I had the pleasure to be in Panama last November. As a delegate of the Swiss Confederation. I will make it short. The event closes here today with the cake cutting ceremony and the reception, so please stay until the end. I know we all have very dense schedules. And in the hallway here, you will see a display of CITES listed specimens from our treasures here, from our collections, and my staff will be more than happy to interact with you on the way out and explain you what's about. Please refer to us if you need anything, and we are here for you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. So we can now pass to the more official part with our invited guests. The first speaker is Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States to the United Nations here in Geneva, Ms. Crooker. I know the US have been supporting CITES since the very beginning and still do so. Please, you have the word. Thank you for being here.
This is, yeah, that's. So thank you very much, Nicola, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy World Wildlife Day. I was telling some of you before that this is actually my first time at the Botanical Gardens here in Geneva, so I am pleased to have this opportunity to see this incredible institution, but mostly just delighted to be with all of you here today and want to also extend my thanks to the Geneva Environment Network for hosting such an important event. Today, as has been said, marks the 50th anniversary of the agreement on the final text of CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which was signed at the State Department in Washington, D.C. In the past 50 years, CITES has become the signature international agreement for safeguarding the world's wild plants and animals from exploitation due to international trade. It is the key tool to ensure that trade in species is legal, regulated, and sustainable. CITES now counts 184 contracting parties and protects nearly 40,000 species against exploitation in trade, which is a commendable achievement. I am proud to speak today, not only because of the special connection the United States shares with CITES as its first signatory. And you can imagine that it's not always that I get to say that the United States was the first signatory of a treaty, but also because of my own appreciation for wildlife conservation and endangered species. I grew up spending summers sort of between two places. One was in Zimbabwe, where my mother was born and my grandparents still lived at that time. So I spent part of my childhood seeing the elephants and the rhinos and all of the other wildlife in Africa, across African countries, but also spent the other parts of my summers in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York, where my grandfather was a key conservationist, something that my father carries on today, where my father's family has been going for now many generations. And so I really have seen this issue starting when I was a kid, but also CITES having been signed in Washington, and because of that background, was one of the first things that I studied in the way, in the form of an international agreement. And I can say truthfully really formed part of the reason why I decided to engage in international affairs and international relations. So it's particularly meaningful for me to be here today. We are, of course, gathered here because we appreciate what a rich and beautiful world we live in, and we recognize the responsibility we all carry to protect it for future generations. The threats to the species of our planet are even greater today than they were 50 years ago, as exploitative trade, environmental degradation, and habitat loss continue to threaten the world's biodiversity. And all countries must take bolder action to address these challenges. In the United States, we've strengthened our laws and prosecuted the poachers and criminal organizations who traffic wildlife, while increasing our support of partner governments to build international capacity to stop poaching and illegal timber harvesting. Together with the government of Norway and others, the United States is also developing the Nature Crime Alliance to aggressively pursue the powerful criminal networks that engage not only in wildlife trafficking, but also in illegal logging, mining, fishing, and land conversion that destroy natural habitats and precious ecosystems. We've also launched a new alliance with Canada and the UK last summer to tackle illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, to bring greater transparency to seafood supply chains and combat the harmful practices that are contributing to the collapse of critical ocean ecosystems. On ocean conservation, the United States recently announced an ambitious new effort called the Ocean Conservation Pledge to encourage countries to protect or conserve 30% of their national waters by 2030. 16 countries have already joined this 30 for 30 pledge that strengthens our shared commitment to protect ocean biodiversity and animal habitats. These alliances and pledges, in tandem with the work of CITES and the UN Environment Program, are testament that today's theme of partnerships for wildlife conservation is uniquely fitting. International cooperation is the key and remains the key to countering animal exploitation and biodiversity loss. So let's use today to celebrate our collective accomplishments of the past 50 years of CITES, while renewing our shared commitment to bold collective action to protect and conserve the world's ecosystems and the creatures that inhabit them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice words, inspiring words. our next speaker is from the Swiss Confederation. She is part of the management authority of CITES Switzerland. Switzerland is also the depositary state of the convention. The secretary here in Geneva, Lisa Bradbury, who is also a personal friend. So thank you, Lisa, for being here. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It is a great honor to be here today, marking this important occasion, 50 years of CITES and also World Wildlife Day. I stand here representing Switzerland, a country that has always been closely linked to CITES and has multiple roles within the convention. As a contracting party, the implementation of CITES has always been a high priority to Switzerland. In fact, we were among the first countries to have implemented the convention on the 1st of July, 1975. Switzerland also holds the function as a depository government. We feel honored that the CITES community entrusts our country with this task. Furthermore, we are the hosting country of the CITES Secretariat here in Geneva, making it an important city for the parties and many other stakeholders to meet in person on a regular basis. Geneva has functioned as a center of excellence for many years and will certainly continue to do so. The role of the CITES Secretariat in implementing and making the convention work cannot be valued high enough. With the expertise, leadership, and the high competence of the staff, the Secretariat plays an invaluable role in achieving the goals of the convention as well as moving it forward. We are very proud of these different functions and to be carrying the responsibilities that come along with them. There are various ways in which we contribute to the work of the convention, namely by being one of the major donors or through the expertise and service that we dedicate to the different committees. Switzerland has a strong representation throughout the working groups and takes on active roles such as chair of the Animals Committee and also regional representative in the Plants Committee. There are many different reasons to celebrate World Wildlife Day, and we have been a strong supporter of this platform ever since it has been founded in 2013. By giving this day a different theme each year, we can shine a special spotlight of one of the many areas that deserve to be highlighted. This year, we're focusing on partnerships, which seems suitable for a convention like CITES that cannot function in silo and relies heavily on partnerships in order to thrive. Within CITES, we have strong partnership with scientifically based institutions, but also the trade and NGO communities who all have large amounts of data and knowledge that we can use in our deliberations and decision making. IQIC is a great example of partnerships when it comes to combating illegal wildlife trade, a major threat to our wildlife. A further partnership which we need to strengthen has been identified by the recent assessment on the sustainable use of wild resources by CITES. It is with the indigenous people and local communities, who are often the guardians of the wildlife that we aim to protect with our convention, and who should benefit from sustainable use and also the protection of wildlife. In our role as a management authority, we experience firsthand every day how crucial close partnerships built on mutual trust are. For example, with customs, who are our eyes and ears on the ground. With other parties to the convention, with whom we exchange knowledge and information on a daily basis. And also with the scientific community, for example, regarding forensic expertise, to name just a few. This list is far from exhaustive. Each and every partnership plays a vital role in making CITES what it is today. A convention known for having effective mechanisms that have a real impact when it comes to implementing its goals. We are very proud to be a part of this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your words. Thanks also to Switzerland, to the Swiss government for having been so supportive and also pragmatic. So it's just impact to the CITES convention. I'm also very amazed by the Federal Office of Safety on how they have fun, they work well together, and they are very relevant. So our next speaker is the ambassador of Panama. His Excellency Mr. Castillo. Thank you very much for being here. And thanks also for having organized the last COP in Panama.
Gracias. Buenas tardes, distinguidos embajadores, autoridades de Ginebra, miembros de la Convención sobre el Comercio Internacional de Especies Amenazadas de Fauna y Flora Silvestre, CITES, participantes, señoras y señores invitados. Nos sentimos honrados.
Sorry, Ambassador, I will try to translate by paragraph, but Spanish is one of the official languages of the convention. So he will deliver the speech in Spanish, and perhaps we'll have speeches in French as well. So we are going to translate paragraph by paragraph, if you don't mind.
Le faire en français.
En français.
Oui, c'est pas grave.
Alors, good afternoon, Excellencies, ambassadors, authorities, members of the convention, ladies and gentlemen.
Nos sentimos honrados como representantes permanentes de la misión de la República de Panamá en Ginebra y miembros del grupo de países de América Latina y el Caribe, GRULAC, participando como orador. Deseándoles la bienvenida en este solemne acto que se celebra el mismo día de manera paralela en la ciudad de Washington, en donde igualmente extendemos nuestros saludos a los allá participantes y de manera especial a la Secretaría General de CITES, su secretaria, señora Ivonne Higuero.
We feel honored as permanent representative of the mission of Panama in Geneva and members of the GRULAC to participate as speakers today. We wish you a warm welcome. Thank you. And in Washington, they are celebrating in a parallel ceremony the 50th anniversary of CITES, and we sent our greetings also to all the participants in Washington, and especially to the Secretary General of CITES, Ms. Yvonne Higuero.
Nos hemos permitido hacer esta intervención en español, tomando en cuenta que el multilingüismo así lo permite y sobre todo dentro de CITES, ya que es considerado uno de los lenguajes de trabajo.
We take the liberty to make this intervention in Spanish, taking into account multilingualism, and above all because in CITES, Spanish is considered one of the official working languages.
En efecto, hoy no se trata de una conferencia, no se trata de un panel de especialistas, se trata de una celebración. En este feliz aniversario de los 50 años de aprobación de la Convención por el Comercio Internacional de Especies Amenazadas de Fauna y Flora Silvestre, CITES, cuya fecha fue hoy, 3 de marzo de 1973, en Washington, en una reunión con representantes de 80 países.
In fact, today we are not attending a conference. It's not a specialist panel. It's a celebration. It's the happy anniversary of the 50 years of the signing of the Convention on International Trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora. CITES, the date of 3rd of March is the date of the signing in Washington, D.C. In a meeting attended by 80 parties.
Como es del conocimiento de todos, CITES regula el comercio mundial de las especies de fauna y flora y actualmente 183 países y la Unión Europea son parte de la convención, protegiendo en diversos grados a más de 37.000 especies de animales y plantas, regulando se comercialice como especímenes vivos o como productos elaborados.
As we know, CITES regulates trade worldwide in species of fauna and flora, and actually 183 parties and the European Union, 183 states and the European Union are party to the convention, protecting in different levels more than 37,000 species of animals and plants, regulating and making sure that the trade in the specimens life or in products manufactured.
Actualmente, el comercio internacional de vida silvestre implica miles de billones de dólares y afecta a cientos de millones de especímenes de animales y plantas. Los niveles de exportación son elevados y su comercio, junto con otros factores como la destrucción del hábitat, pueden mermar considerablemente las poblaciones y hacer que algunas especies estén al borde de la extinción.
Actually, international trade in wildlife involves thousands of millions of dollars and affects hundreds of millions of specimens of animals and plants. The export levels are high, and trade, together with other factors like the destruction of habitats, can deplete considerably the populations and make that some species are on the brink of extinction.
CITES ha realizado desde 1975 19 convenciones que se ocupan de este tema fundamental para la subsistencia de la vida en nuestro querido planeta Tierra. En noviembre del 2022 se reunieron en la ciudad de Panamá en magna conferencia más de 160 representantes de gobiernos y cerca de 3.000 asistentes para adoptar decisiones que afectarían el futuro de unas 600 especies de fauna y flora.
CITES has organized since 1975 19 conferences of the parties that took care of the fundamental theme for the survival of the lives of us in our dear planet Earth. And in last November 22 in Panama City, we held the last conference with more than 160 representatives from governments and more than 3,000 participants to adopt decisions that will impact the future of 600 species of animals and plants.
En esta llamada COP-CITES 19, en Panamá fue exitosa con la presencia de más de 180 países. Se incluyeron nuevas especies, casi 100 diferentes especies de tiburones y rayas, más de 150 especies de árboles, 160 anfibios, incluidas ranas tropicales, 50 especies de tortugas terrestres y varias especies de pájaros cantores.
The last COP19 in Panama, that was a success with the attendance of over 160 countries. It was decided to include new species, almost 100 different species of sharks and rays, more than 150 species of trees, 160 amphibians, including the crystal frogs, and 50 species of freshwater turtles and other species of some birds.
En total, más de 500 especies serán parte de los listados, haciendo de esta convención un ejemplo de cooperación. Así lo informó la Secretaría General, la señora Ivonne Higuero, que de las 52 propuestas presentadas, 46 fueron adoptadas. Celebremos entonces con muchísimo optimismo estos logros y seamos conscientes de que la corresponsabilidad para la supervivencia de la fauna y flora es un asunto de todos.
In total, more than 500 species will be listed, making of this conference an example of cooperation, as informed by the Secretary General of CITES, Ms. Yvonne Higuero. 52 proposals presented. Of the 52 proposals presented, 46 were adopted. Let's celebrate with optimism this success and be aware. Let's be aware that of the co-responsibility for the survival of the wild fauna and flora that is a task for all of us.
Vale la pena mencionar que en estos momentos en Panamá se celebra la conferencia Our Ocean 2023 con la participación de más de 600 expertos y dignatarios de países que mantienen una constante lucha y actividad colectiva para mantener los océanos limpios, restaurar el clima y regenerar la vida marina en una batalla en la cual todos debemos participar.
It's worthwhile to mention that at this right moment in Panama, we are celebrating the conference Our Oceans 2023 with the participation of more than 600 experts and representatives from states that are discussing the options for the fight and the activities, the collective activities for maintaining the oceans clean, to mitigate and restore climate, and to regenerate the marine life in a battle that we all should participate.
Panamá, por su parte, tiene 93.390 kilómetros cuadrados de superficie marina reservados, siendo así el 54% total de la superficie. Nos convertimos en el segundo país del mundo con un porcentaje elevado después de Palaos. Esto gracias a la iniciativa de nuestro presidente Laurentino Cortizo, la canciller y el ministro de Ambiente de Panamá. Deseamos agradecer a las autoridades suizas de la ciudad de Ginebra por su extraordinario rol como anfitriones de la sede CITES. Agradecimiento igual a la dirección del Jardín Botánico y a todos los asistentes a este acto.
Panama has 93,390 square kilometers of surface, of marine surface protected, being the 54% of the surface, and this action make Panama the second country in the world with a high percentage of protected marine surface after Palaos. Thanks to the initiative of our President, Laurentino Cortizo, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Environment, I would like to thank the authorities, the Swiss authorities and the city of Geneva for the great role as host and as host of the CITES Convention.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Muchísimas gracias, Ambassador Castillo Correa, por sus palabras. Thank you very much for having spoken in Spanish, also beautiful language of the official languages of the convention. When I see the staff of the CITES Secretariat working, when they organize the meetings and the committees, I always wonder whether their day is longer than 24 hours. Because they manage to do so much work in such a little time, and with a staff that is not enormous either. And so our next speaker is Juan Carlos Vázquez. He is the head of the Legal Affairs Division at the CITES Secretariat here in Geneva. You have the word. Thanks.
Thank you very much. In CITES, we say we are tiny but mighty. So you can see we do everything. And you notice I am not a professional interpreter, but I'm very glad to do that here. Excellencies, distinguished authorities, dear friends of wildlife, and in CITES, as said by the director of the Botanical Garden, wildlife means animals and plants. On behalf of the CITES Secretary General, Ms. Yvonne Higuero, who is in Washington today, celebrating with the government of the United States and partners the main celebration of this day, and all my CITES colleagues here in the room, I'm very proud to celebrate the 50 years of this convention and the 10th edition of the World Wildlife Day. I'm proud to also say I came with the idea of the Wildlife Day, and I have spent 25 of these 50 years working in this convention. So I was very touched by your words, Ambassador, of your trajectory in international law. After 50 years, CITES continues to bloom, and its roots are well planted in the conservation field and the land of international law. The idea behind CITES originated at the 1963 IUCN General Assembly in Nairobi, and after a long incubation of 10 years, the Washington Convention was signed by 80 countries on 3rd March 1973 in Washington, D.C. It was called the Magna Carta for Wildlife. CITES is that great charter for nature, and its preamble is one of the most beautiful of all the multilateral agreements, recognizing that peoples and states are and should be the best protectors of their own wild fauna and flora, says that preamble. The quality and beauty of the text of the convention makes CITES unique. It is focused, pragmatic, specific, action-oriented, and realistic, and establishes a robust international regulatory regime that has stood the test of time. We believe that this convention is needed now more than ever and continues to bloom today because wildlife unites people. One of the major services wildlife provides is peace. Not only peace of mind, but global peace between states and nations. 50 years ago, the United States hosted in Washington, D.C., this World Wildlife Conference to negotiate and sign this convention in a context somehow similar to the global situation that we're experiencing today. President Nixon, in his opening remarks, said that the common search for a better environment can be one of those activities which serves to unify nations. This shows that wildlife serves to unify nations and as a universal currency that brings together states and peoples. Secondly, CITES focus on implementation. It's a regulatory, not a declaratory instrument. This means that we are with the boots on the ground daily, working on the real world for a better present, acting now. Our new trade rules and listings adopted in Panama last November entered into effect last week. These rules are legally binding. CITES is hard law and soft power at the same time. CITES embraces imperfection and always make decisions. This means that if there is no consensus, parties vote, make decisions, and move forward. If authorities don't have all the perfect science and data available, they adapt, go ahead of science, and make decisions. CITES is mature and well-managed, legal and sustainable wildlife trade generates benefits for local communities, indigenous peoples, and national economies in rich biodiversity countries. Today, we celebrate partnerships that have been forged in the implementation of the convention during these 50 years. We celebrate our partnership with UNCTAD, Blue Biotrade, and with many other partners, including Interpol, FAO, UNODC, the World Customs Organization, WTO, etc. But we celebrate mostly the 183 states and their peoples, parties to this convention, we celebrate their vision and commitment from 1973 to today. Many thanks to the European Union, the only regional economic organization that is a party to this convention, because you are a fantastic example of lasting and financial and technical cooperation. We also thank warmly the Swiss government for hosting the Secretariat here in Geneva, for the generous financial support, for being the depositary government, and for today's reception. It's not a coincidence that we are based in a venue of peace building, neutrality, and multilateralism. Thank you to the Geneva Environment Network, Diana Rizzolio, thank you very much, a partner for all these 10 editions of the Wildlife Day, and to the director of the Botanical Garden, what a perfect venue for celebrating this anniversary, and his staff for all their efforts in organizing and hosting today's reception. My final words to my colleague David Morgan, who is leaving the Secretariat this week after 20 years of dedicated service. I say leaving because CITES people never retire. David, you incarnate the DNA and the mission of this treaty, the scientific rigor, the passion, and the pragmatism. And we thank you and wish you a smooth transition from being a CITES staff member to an ex-staff member. Happy 50th birthday, CITES of Maxwell. Happy Wildlife Day.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for your nice words and also for your work of yourself and your colleagues that you do every day. Also. And so now we have the next part of this event with some partners. Today's theme is partnerships for nature conservation. So the organizers invited a few of the very important partners to this convention. Our first speaker is Lotte Knudsen, the ambassador of the European Union and head of the delegation of the European Union, the United Nations, and other international.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, Director. Thank you very much for hosting us here, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here today for the 50th anniversary of CITES on this year's World Wildlife Day. This is multilateral Geneva, and I can't think of a better place to host the CITES convention. And I hope that we as ambassadors, perhaps here in Geneva, can also increasingly help, call it to campaign, create more awareness of the importance of CITES. Like Ambassador Crocker, I also very much believe that we all have an obligation and a role to help with nature protection and the protection of wildlife. So whatever small role we can play here, I think we're all very happy to be part of this. And I think this year's World Wildlife Day is rightly dedicated to partnerships. And I think just the list here of partners already set a very good example for what we can do here in Geneva by bringing different parties together. I mean, we all know that biodiversity is in great danger, and in no small part to the damages we ourselves have unwittingly inflicted upon nature and wildlife over the years. And therefore, it's also part, I think, of our task to try to reverse this trend of weakening or extinction of species, which can't be achieved without strong partnerships. Partnerships is very much part of the way the EU works. So we'll be strong supporters of this axis of your activities, and it's partnerships in a multifaceted, multi-layered way. It's partnerships between source countries, transit and destination countries. It's partnerships between relevant authorities, civil society, academia, private sector, not least. And it's also between, of course, all relevant international organizations to create synergies of how we can work together. and use common frameworks such as the One Health approach, as well as marine and timber species. Partnerships is also about multi-stakeholders. I think this is something we see across multilateral Geneva, across the multilateral system, and it's not that different from multi-stakeholder ways of working, which is, I think, part of the modern world of modern multilateralism. In the EU, we're always a driving force for international rules and frameworks. That's no secret. And in this area here, we have also been, I think, drivers for a multilateral framework and global rules at all times to try to regulate activity and fight trafficking and other such damaging behaviour, be it in CITES, the COP19, and biodiversity COP15. We have always, in the context of CITES, very actively engaged with range states, because we are actually a major transit and destination market for illegally trafficked wildlife. And we have also, or are playing a role in terms of preparing listings in many countries. And we provide indeed financial support, as you said, but not just that. We also provide political, diplomatic support, as well as technical assistance. And our delegations across the world in countries which are concerned are increasingly engaging in the protection of wildlife and nature conservation. It's one of the issues where we try to sensitize our diplomats across the world that this forms part of a modern diplomatic agenda. We all know it's not enough to have global rules and frameworks, but without implementation and enforcement, we cannot achieve results. And this is what your work is all about as well. So agreeing on listings is not sufficient. We also try to help countries with the implementation process, the active measures it's required to enforce the rules that are agreed in CITES and COPs and the biodiversity frameworks. We're, of course, a major donor in the area of biodiversity for many partner countries across the world, and it's more and more seen as an integrated policy of the EU in the area of environment as well as climate. One example of what we do is indeed Nature Africa, which is a flagship EU initiative to support biodiversity conservation in Africa. And it supports key landscapes for conservation and development and helps to create jobs and not least involve the local communities and make them take ownership of the importance of nature conservation for economic reasons and also for reasons of, call it, heritage, to preserve the local communities. This is where we need a win-win situation so that all parties see the value of protecting the environment and species and preserve our ecosystems. We're also supporting the implementation of CITES by providing funding to programs such as the Tree Species Programme, as well as the monitoring and illegal killing of elephants, called MIKE, and activities of the International Consortium of Combating Wildlife Crime, just among some of the examples where we are involved. Preserving marine species, as agreed at the recent CITES COPs, is also one of the areas where we work, which will require great amounts of strengthened cooperation between CITES and international organisations, particularly in the area of fisheries, and again working with local communities to ensure that they also benefit and preserve their natural sort of habitation. An initiative on our own side is the renewed version of our action plan, already in 2016. We had an action plan, we now have a revised version, taking into account a better understanding of how to protect wildlife, and it has a much stronger focus on root causes, for instance, and working with local communities, and also on the enforcement angle, as well as training, for instance, of rangers and experts to work in concerned areas. And this was adopted only 4 months ago, and is actually a very, very useful call it CLAC, for our own follow-up work in the EU. We all agree that wildlife trafficking is a very worrying phenomenon. There's a lot of it arriving in the EU, not to mention the broader social and economic consequences, as well as the ecological impact. And we hope that this action plan will bring a lot more attention to this area of work among our member states, among our partner countries. We also very much support, partnership to combat wildlife trafficking as part of the notion of global partnerships. And we will strengthen, because of this action plan, our efforts in all the countries concerned outside the EU, and try to create better teamwork between member states, EU enforcement actors in the member states, national authorities, as well as key non-EU countries, in order to have a triangular cooperation. We also need partnerships to prevent wildlife trafficking and addressing its root causes at local, regional and national level, to support livelihoods not least, and the sustainable use of wildlife and wildlife products by encouraging and facilitating the legal and sustainable sourcing of wildlife products. And we also know, to conclude, that we can't do this without the active involvement of civil society and private sector. They will be very, very important players in the development and the implementation of policies. And I finally just think that it's very important to keep all the work you're doing on the broader multilateral agenda. I think these days there's so much more awareness of the importance of, call it, global multilateral challenges that can only be solved through international cooperation. And I think it's a very, very good hook for constantly highlighting the need for everybody to work collectively on CITES in order to create results, in order to make a difference, not least because, as the slogan says, this is about saving the planet, and you're all part of that process. Also, congratulations to all the work that you're all doing, including the CITES network. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thanks also to the European Union, which has become already, I think, more and more fundamental and essential partner and actor in actively protecting. Our next speaker is Mio Shilodov. She is the acting director of the Division of International Trade and Commodities at the UN Conference on Trade and Development, which is UNCTAD.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, to join you at this happy occasion to celebrate the World Wildlife Day. For more than 2 decades, UNCTAD and CITES have struck a formidable partnership that has withstood economic downturns, geopolitical crisis, and very recently, the crippling impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbated by threats of the triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. At this occasion, the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Greenspan, wants me to inform you that UNCTAD is fully committed to continue our partnership with CITES following the Memorandum of Understanding that we signed in 2010, which really aims at enhancing livelihoods of poor in remote and marginal areas that harvest and trade in these species, which are wildlife species, while ensuring its conservation, and to promote opportunities for businesses that comply with CITES requirements and national legislation. So those of you who may not be familiar with how UNCTAD and CITES work together, I just would like to share couple of examples out of many. The first is the one that is called UNCTAD Asikuda eCITES based solution. This is a automated customs procedure which streamlines the flow of legal CITES listed species trade. In its pilot phase in Sri Lanka, it increased annual approval rates through eCITES permits by 17% between 2020 and 2021. And more recently, it has been fully implemented in a country like Mozambique. The second example, I think you have already mentioned about this, the joint activities titled Blue Biotrade Project. It is a joint project with CITES, UNCTAD, and Eastern Caribbean Community on the treatment of queen conch, this huge shellfish, which has some iconic value in Eastern Caribbean culture. And they, together working, we have come up with a regional work plan, which will be implemented in the next 5 years. Of course, we have this example of the biotrade program, which really looks at the business model of how the local communities, often very much marginalized group of people, could continue making living out of using some wildlife species, but in a way that is sustainable, inclusive, and sustained. So these are a couple of examples that we actually work together. And as I said, the Secretary General of UNCTAD and we all the colleagues in UNCTAD are fully committed to continue working with CITES. And also we are very much looking forward to working with all the partners for the future, brighter future for the wildlife. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director of that. I'm particularly fond of the permitting systems, and I'm glad to hear how quickly it is implemented. I didn't know that. Now, our last speaker of this session is Alice Tipping. She's Director of Trade and Sustainable Development at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, which is IISD. And I think you're going to hear something about fisheries. We're likely to be correctly. The floor is yours, Alice.
Well, thank you and merci beaucoup, Nicolas. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here. You are going to hear about fisheries, but it's a particular honor because I think, as the ambassador has said, CITES inspired many of us to work at the intersection of trade and the environment, and you'll hear a little bit about how it inspired me in just a moment. I am probably the only non-governmental speaker of this panel, so I'm really pleased to provide that perspective. I'm also the representative of the logo that most of you probably don't recognize on the list. The IISD is a non-profit think tank. We're based in Canada, but we have quite a large office here in Geneva from which we do a lot of work on investment policy, energy policy, and trade policy, which is what I lead. So our role essentially is to provide governments with impartial support, technical and scientific evidence to help them design policy that best supports sustainable development. And we do that specifically with respect to trade policy because, of course, the World Trade Organization is based here in Geneva. And a major achievement of that organization and the trade policy community last year was, of course, the conclusion of a multilateral agreement on fisheries subsidies in June last year. This is a hugely significant achievement. It is only the second multilateral trade agreement that has ever been achieved since the WTO was established. And it is the first multilateral trade agreement ever with an environmental objective. And that objective is to avoid the overexploitation of the world's fisheries resources, still wildlife, but more broadly to protect marine ecosystems and to protect the livelihoods of the communities that depend on these ecosystems, whether it be for food or jobs or income. And here comes the point about partnerships. So IISD was heavily involved in these negotiations. We provided support and encouragement to the governments negotiating these quite difficult rules. And we did this over many, many years. 14 years of my own career, if the truth be told. And we relied consistently in our work on input from the CITES Secretariat to help governments understand how they could base and how they could build trade policy, subsidies policy rules on the basis of scientific evidence. Now, this was something that the CITES Secretariat had years of experience with, but it was actually quite new and actually quite challenging for the trade policy community. So my heartfelt thanks to the CITES Secretariat for consistently making staff available to come to our webinars and our seminars and explain to governments how their system worked. But of course, the work continues. And just to acknowledge the governments that have already spoken, Switzerland was the first country to ratify the Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. I was in Panama just last week at a regional workshop designed to help the governments of Latin America to understand the agreement and to prepare to implement it and ratify it. And there are ongoing negotiations on additional rules on further damaging subsidies. And we rely, of course, on the political diplomatic support of some of the world's largest economies, the United States and the EU, in pushing those negotiations forward. So we will continue as IISD to support governments to ratify and add to those rules. And we look forward to calling again on the CITES Secretariat for their experience as our very successful partnership continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice. I am impressed by the achievements of IFSD, and there is also your personal achievements, so congratulations for the work done. And we have to move on to the film that is going to be projected. Is that correct? We have a short movie. I don't know if the whole movie will be shown or maybe a little bit less. This is a movie that is a documentary on the white bark pine, which is a pine species, used always for botanists in the room, which plays a key role in its ecosystem. And it is part of the International World Wildlife Day film showcase that is organized annually by the US organization Chancellor.
The evidence is abundant and irrefutable that people are drawn to wildlands. There's something that resonates in the human soul, in our human condition. And there is a particular resonance that comes from having white bark pine forests present. It is unique within a landscape that is unique. It has a sense of timelessness because you are walking through a forest of trees that are hundreds of years old. And what they offer on the landscape can't be replicated. It can't be duplicated in a short period of time. In a culture that seems to gravitate to the immediate, there is a longevity and permanence that you find in white bark pine forests that even if we can't fully express it, draws us in.
The thing that I admire and appreciate the most about white bark pine is its tenacity. You see this thing growing on the most amazing rich tops, and in these environments where no other tree can exist.
We've been working with white bark pine for several years now. I think of it like our people. Our people have survived. Our people are resilient.
There's something really magical about being in a really high elevation place that's really windy and really inhospitable, and to see these giant, beautiful things thriving.
Whitebark pine is almost exclusively a high elevation tree within its entire range. They're the craggy, gnarled trees that you see at timberline. They're that top layer to the forest in the mountains, all the way to the Sierras and Cascades and north into Alberta and British Columbia.
If you are going hiking at high elevations, you probably pass a whitebark in the western United States and not known it. If you are going backcountry skiing, or if you're at many of the ski resorts in the western United States, you probably ski past whitebark and not known it.
Where whitebark pine grows, its canopies redistribute snow. The shade from their crowns will preserve that snow well into the summer.
These forests actually stabilize the snowpack, allowing the snow to melt slower by high quality water for longer periods during the summer.
In this area, a lot of folks downstream rely on that snow melt for their irrigation water, for their culinary water, to replenish the water in the water table. Whitebark pine has so many benefits, but probably the most important ecosystem service that whitebark provides is a wildlife food source. A whitebark cone is about 4 or 5 inches long, and they are very sad. But the magic is what's inside them.
Whitebark produces these unbelievably large seeds, the largest seed of any tree that we have in the Northern Rockies.
Because the cones are large, the big nuts, a lot of animals rely on them. And the grizzly bears love it. They're trying to put them on the back before moving into the den for a winter period. They need to gain as much weight as possible. And the whitebark pine offers them a large return for the energy expended to receive it. And we have enough data after many years of research to know that they are inexorably tied to the whitebark pine. Abraham, you're in the midst of a whitebark pine forest here. When it's a good whitebark year, this is a wildlife hub. So this is a real important area for bears, for red squirrels. But the nutcrackers are arguably the most spectacular.
I think that the most interesting thing about whitebark that really catches people's attention is the fact that the tree could not exist without this bird that plants its seeds.
Almost all of the whitebark pine reproduction up and down the Rocky chain is due to nutcrackers catching seeds. So this forest really depends on the bird.
The nutcracker will come along and remove the seeds from the cone. And then they bury small clusters of these seeds pretty much everywhere in the high mountain environment.
They stash these seeds, sometimes up to tens of thousands of caches, and no one can believe that they can recover these things, but they do. They don't get them all though. And so some of those caches grow into whitebark pine, and most of whitebark pine is established that way. And so the two are intertwined. So it's a really very important relationship, and it's starting to fall apart. It's falling apart because the whitebarks are dying for multiple reasons. And it's exemplified here. Everything I look out and see that's dead is whitebark.
Since the start of my career, the decline of whitebark pine is just breathtaking. In areas we've lost over 95% of these trees.
I began to see whole entire of the watersheds die. It was heartbreaking to see that.
You go out there and it's really hard to find a healthy tree on the landscape. It's depressing. It's everything from these little tiny seedlings that are less than a foot tall, all the way up to the biggest trees on the landscape. And every single one of them virtually has white pine coast arrest.
White bark pine is facing extinction primarily because of white pine coast arrest. White pine coast arrest is this non-native fungus that infects a tree through its needles and slowly creates these cankers that then cut off the flow of nutrients and water, killing limbs. Over time, that spreads and will kill the entire tree.
This disease has been spreading through white bark pine for nearly a century. This is the main existential threat to white bark pine.
I think if you look back on some of the history of diseases like this, pathogens that have come through North America, the classic case is chestnut blight, which came into the eastern US in the late 1800s. And 40 years later, there were no American chestnut left in the forests.
If we fail to do anything for white bark pine, we are going to end up with many regions of our high mountain areas without it, and we lose the ecosystem services, the wildlife food, the habitat protection, the watershed protection. It will be very apparent that some cataclysm affected our western forests mightily on a large scale.
I don't think I'm seeing this. So as we're coming in here to set up, we're looking for trees that we know to be genetically resistant to blister rust. So these are the ones we're going to be changing in today.
We have no cure for white pine blister rust, and the only recourse we have is to look for the small number of individuals in each population that seems to have natural genetic resistance. Those individuals are the foundation of restoring white bark pine.
These cones will be shipped to the Coeur d'Alene nursery in Idaho and eventually used to grow seedlings in the nursery.
The seedlings we are growing have some level of resistance to blister rust. On average, we're growing about 150,000 seedlings per year. 150,000 one-year-old seedlings, 150,000 two-year-old seedlings.
When we plant trees, the first thing is we really look for an excellent planting location. We're looking for a log that's down or maybe a stump, something that's going to provide shade and hold some moisture and give it the best life and the best start that it can have.
It's very gratifying to go out and see the seedlings on the landscape. It's very humbling, I'll say, that we are having such an impact. And in this special case, the white bark pine, where this is a threatened species, we're able to recreate it, put it back on the site.
I have a lot of hope for the future of white bark pine because I see the passion in the people who are working to restore it. They're doing their research, planting trees, collecting homes, growing all the seedlings. And I look at all these marvelous, passionate community people, and I can't help but have hope.
Wow, impressive images. Now I know where I'm gonna program some holidays. Now, I think we have something to show you, which is UN stamp. I learned that the UN was a post office. Juan Carlos. Can I ask you maybe to say a few words about the stuff that I don't know where it is here?
Thank you very much. For this, but we have these editions every year. The Postal Service of the UN, since many years, we celebrate also by the new stamps. And every year we announce the stamps of the year. And today we're pleased to announce the species that have been selected for the celebration of the anniversary. And this World Wildlife Day. So I don't know if we have copies of this or just the digital. You saw we're moving from paper to digital. So this is the new species that we are celebrating today, all animals. We have whales, we have cats, and we have some flowers there, and we have some plants as well. So that's all these are CITES listed species. So by the attention of the public and also the diplomatic services of the countries in UN duty stations to help us protect the natural heritage of this beautiful country. Thank you.
Very much. Now we have the last speaker of today. Who's going to give a closing remark. He's a very special person, actually, because he's my boss. He's the vice mayor of the city of Geneva, and a very well appreciated boss, by the way. He's the vice mayor of the city of Geneva, and also the president of Geneva City.
Thank you, Nicolas. I didn't ask him to tell that. And just a few words about the stamps. As a kid, like many of you maybe, I was collecting stamps. I was fascinated by stamps because every stamp tells a story somehow about our local or global universe. So it's fantastic that you still have stamps despite the digitalization of mail. You know, we don't use letters so often anymore. It's still very important to have stamps. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers, dear partners, dear friends, I'm very honored as member of the Executive Council of the city to address you a few words to conclude this very important, pleasant celebration ceremony, but also in a way moving because we know that the challenges are ahead, that the work is enormous, that we still have to do together. And we really know that the partnership is the actual theme of that celebration, that more than ever, we need very close, intense and diversified partnerships between all stakeholders, being authorities, NGOs, scientists, civil society in general, to tackle all these very crucial challenges. I mean, the movie was a very good example of, you know, both people engage professionally, but also in civil society to preserve our nature, biodiversity, so the dangers that we face in all places of the world. Even a place like Switzerland is supposed to be quite protected, and the population that enjoys the preserves and protects the nature, we also have many dangers. Je vais continuer en français. Comme je l'ai dit, c'est une célébration, mais les célébrations, c'est aussi l'occasion à la fois de mettre un regard en arrière sur le travail effectué et de rappeler tout le travail qui reste à faire ensemble. L'alarme a été donnée il y a plus de 50 ans, parce que la Convention elle-même est le résultat de plusieurs années de travail. Nous marquons 50 ans de la Convention CITES. Elle a certainement été très utile et importante pour préserver la faune et la flore, pour aussi contribuer à la prise de conscience de l'importance de lutter contre le trafic illégal, au-delà de la question du trafic illégal, de préserver en général notre nature. Nous sommes très honorés de pouvoir aussi marquer cet événement à Genève. C'est évident que la cérémonie principale sera à Washington, et c'est important puisque c'est chez vous qu'a été signé ce texte fondamental. Mais Genève, ça a été dit souvent aujourd'hui, est une ville de multilatéralisme. Et c'est une responsabilité pour nous, les autorités, aussi bien de la ville de Genève, du canton de Genève et la Confédération, de toujours être attentifs à préserver les meilleures conditions possibles pour que l'activité multilatérale puisse se tenir à Genève de manière aussi inclusive, à la fois solide et innovante, incluant tous les acteurs de la société qui peuvent contribuer à la fois au diagnostic, à l'analyse, mais bien sûr aussi à la recherche de solutions qui soient viables et mises en œuvre ensuite. Nous avons une tradition à la fois très scientifique, le Conservatoire Jardin Botanique, Nicolas Schoenberger, son excellent directeur et son excellente équipe en témoignent d'un lieu qui est magique, que la population apprécie énormément et qui contribue bien sûr à sensibiliser la population justement à l'importance de la biodiversité en ville. Et effectivement, ces excellences, elles peuvent revenir au Jardin Botanique quand vous voulez. Vous êtes bienvenus pour un moment plus détendu. L'équipe se fera un grand plaisir de vous accueillir. Vous êtes à 2 pas, effectivement, si on regarde le Palais des Nations et l'agenda international. Et puis, effectivement, Genève est une ville de science, une ville multilatérale, une ville de diplomatie internationale. Et même au niveau local, nous sommes très inquiets de voir la biodiversité se dégrader. Là, on parle par exemple de la sécheresse qui est en cours. Hein. Nous avons même en Suisse un manque d'eau, ce qui est quand même paradoxal pour le château d'eau de l'Europe. Et ce n'est pas seulement une question d'eau, c'est une question de pollution, de tous les effets induits par l'activité humaine. Et nous avons donc une stratégie climat de la ville, que je ne vais pas présenter ici, ce serait trop long, comme beaucoup de villes, et une stratégie spécifique pour mon département qui s'occupe donc de culture, de sciences et de numérique. Alors, un mot sur les villes, les gouvernements locaux. Et là, j'utilise aussi ma casquette de chairman, de président du Geneva CITES Hub. Les villes ne font pas les lois en général. Elles sont en bout de la chaîne institutionnelle partout dans les pays, mais elles sont en première loge de la réalité de tous les jours dans le monde urbain. Et vous savez que plus de la moitié de la population mondiale vit maintenant dans les villes. Donc les villes, si je caricature, concentrent à la fois les défis, les problèmes, mais aussi les solutions. Parce qu'elles sont obligées de trouver des solutions pour la population. Et encore, à Genève, nous sommes une petite ville privilégiée, mais quand je rencontre des collègues de grandes métropoles à travers le monde, les défis qu'ils doivent relever, et ils n'ont pas toujours l'appui de leurs gouvernements respectifs. Donc les villes travaillent de plus en plus fortement ensemble, des réseaux très actifs d'échange de pratiques, de diagnostics, de solutions. Mais nous sommes aussi de plus en plus en contact avec le monde multilatéral. Et le Geneva CITES Hub est donc une plateforme qui a été créée avec l'appui de la Confédération suisse pour connecter le monde multilatéral genevois avec le monde des villes et des réseaux de villes, pour qu'il y ait un bénéfice mutuel. Et il y a une forte demande, que ce soit la santé, la migration, les droits humains, la biodiversité, pour interagir avec les gouvernements locaux. Et les gouvernements locaux sont évidemment très demandeurs. Au niveau local, on essaye vraiment, et c'est très très important dans ce débat, le Conservatoire Jardin Botanique, mais aussi les collègues du Musée d'Histoire Naturelle et d'autres institutions, que ça ne reste pas un débat qui est en spécialiste, évidemment. Il est vital que la population puisse comprendre ces enjeux, être associée au débat. Et de nombreuses activités visent à atteindre cet objectif. Et la population est très demandeuse. Nous essayons de voir avec d'autres gouvernements locaux comment ce débat impliquer la population pour qu'elle voit que c'est aussi un bénéfice, ce n'est pas juste une question de principe, c'est un bénéfice collectif de préserver notre nature. Et il y a une grande sensibilité d'ailleurs dans ce domaine-là, dans la gestion de nos villes. Donc un très grand merci, j'aimerais vraiment rendre hommage aussi à l'ensemble des acteurs et actrices de la société civile qui au quotidien se battent pour la protection de notre nature au sens large, la faune et la flore, la biodiversité, les scientifiques bien sûr et le Conservatoire Jardin Botanique en particulier, et bien sûr toutes les autorités, notamment les pays représentés aujourd'hui qui marquent ainsi leur attachement à cet enjeu fondamental pour notre survie collective. Un grand merci et on peut dire joyeux anniversaire à la CITES.
Oh, merci beaucoup, Samy, pour parler. Maintenant, on passe à la partie la plus amusante. Je prends l'occasion aussi pour saluer cordialement de mon côté, comme dit par le magistrat de l'économie. On a besoin de 4 personnes pour ouais. Le capitaine transfert, I think it does.
From my side, if I may have your attention. First of all, thank you very, very much for having been here. Thanks to the excellencies and to all the speakers who honored us with their presence. But thanks a lot to all of you. It's really nice to see so many people interested by the 50th anniversary of CITES. But how to say, I'm very confident for the future, seeing all this interest. Now there is a reception at the end, at the back of the room. Please enjoy, come back and visit us. Thanks a lot for having been here. Also visit the display in our hallway, because there you'll see the treasures that usually nobody is allowed to see. So please, have a nice day. Thank you very, very much.
Before we attack the reception, could I invite all current and past staff members of the CITES Secretariat to join us for a little family photo up here, please? Thank you.
Voilà, c'est bien.
I heard you talk about it.